right. Joining me is Will Peck, head of digital assets at WisdomTree, who, of course, is a leading ETF issuer. So they currently have over $80 billion in ETF assets here in the US. They're over $110 billion in firm assets overall. They're also a publicly traded company, which some people may not be aware of that. But they're now making a significant push into digital assets, which, of course, is what we'll be focusing on. Will, it is so great to reconnect. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, Nate.
So, it is interesting because WisdomTree is a traditional asset manager in the sense that you do offer a full suite of ETFs, including a spot Bitcoin ETF, by the way. But I would say you're quickly becoming untraditional, or let's say innovative, in that the firm is making a huge push into digital assets, which not a lot of traditional asset managers are doing that to the extent that you are right now. And obviously, we're going to talk about WisdomTree Prime and WisdomTree Connect, which are your two big initiatives in the digital asset space right now. But can you talk a little bit about this concerted effort around digital assets overall? Like, why is this important to WisdomTree?
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's helpful just to kind of go a little bit of the background on WisdomTree, which some of your listeners are probably aware of. But WisdomTree, we consider ourselves, I think still the world's largest independent ETF sponsor, one of the original and maybe the original like indie ETF shop, right? So WisdomTree launched its first ETFs 20 years ago on the New York Stock Exchange, launched a number of ETFs on the same day, which the idea behind the firm at the time was really trying to build both a better index, so fundamentally weighted indexing, we call it modern alpha, a term some people might be familiar with, but also in the better structure being ETFs. So our founder, CEO, still in position, John O. Steinberg, did a story on ETFs when he was running a media company, which was effectively, he did the story and he saw, wow, this is a better structure than mutual funds, right? More tax efficient, more liquid, more transparent, better standardization than what you see with like the mutual fund industry, where it's kind of crazy to think about at the time, but you kind of need to open up new paperwork with a new issuer every time you want to do an account. And this idea of having a brokerage account that could hold everything was like this kind of foreign concept to a lot of people. So WisdomTree launched with this idea of better indexes and a better structure. ETFs are better than mutual funds, and that's been completely borne out over time, right? I think today, north of, I don't know where the numbers are today, 10, $12 trillion globally, something like that in the ETF structure, taken in the vast majority of inflows over the past 20 years compared to mutual funds. So that vision of this structure being better and assets and customer demand will move to the structure over time was foundational to WisdomTree. So about 5 years ago, Jono, asked me. My role at the time was head of strategy, so doing corporate development, general strategy stuff. The question of what could do to ETFs, what ETFs did to mutual funds, what could be this next evolution in the wrapper, and pretty quickly we came to think of it as being something related to blockchain, right? Like this idea of tokenized real-world assets, tokenized securities. They just traded differently than you'd see traditional assets trade. Peer-to-peer kind of exchange of value. It was just a new way of thinking about financial services and capital markets. And so we asked ourselves that question, we gained conviction in it, and decided to kind of create and develop a strategy around pursuing this opportunity.
It's so interesting with that backstory because I remember your CEO who you mentioned, Jonathan Steinberg. This was probably a couple of years back, but he made some comments where he said that essentially ETFs are almost 30 years old right now, but in the next 30 years, you're going to be talking about regulated tokens. And he said that's going to prove to be the new wrapper. I remember he also said that something like over the next 5 years, WisdomTree would be recognized as a DeFi business that has an ETF business. Those are pretty strong comments coming from an issuer, an ETF issuer in WisdomTree that has had so much success in the space. So those always just stuck with me. And I think to what you just described, it really shows the vision of innovation, embracing, the next generation wrapper, whatever that may be moving forward. I guess on that note, let's talk WisdomTree Prime, which full disclosure, I have an account there. I put a little money to work last year around the launch. I just wanted to become familiar with it. But the way I would describe this is that it's a personal finance app where you do offer access to digital assets such as Bitcoin and Ethereum. You also have a gold token, which is interesting, and then a full lineup of digital funds that are available there. So just explain what you're building with this.
Yeah, so when we started this journey, thought, all right, we want to be a leader in this next wrapper, and how do we actually bring utility around it? What's good for our business and what's good for the customer? So for us, that was two platforms: one retail facing WisdomTree Prime, another WisdomTree Connect that faces off with kind of people who've got their own wallet infrastructure. Let's kind of describe it as that. So WisdomTree Prime, right, is a exactly right. It's a save, spend, invest app. Feels like any other kind of neobank, neo broker app on your phone. Uh, with all the assets tokenized as the underlying, assets of this platform, right? So when you fund your account, you're sitting then in a tokenized dollar instrument, a stablecoin, effectively. Then you can buy gold, Bitcoin, Ether, or a suite of digital funds that we have, and these are all 40 Act registered mutual funds with a tokenized share record, right? So like everything that you hold in WisdomTree Prime is a blockchain-based asset held in a wallet that you have there. We think that over time this has lots of utility at the start, especially for like the crypto native community of people who would want to stay on chain but would prefer to diversify into other assets beyond what are available to them today. Also adding additional services on top of that, like payments. So one of the things we recently announced was the ability to effectively spend from your money market fund on your debit card. So you don't need to go and do two separate transactions. You can keep all of your liquidity in your money market fund, earning near 5% today, right? And then just swipe that card directly and spend directly from that. And that is kind of unlocked by this modern infrastructure that we've built this on. Some things blockchain, but other things just kind of being a bit more nimble and using the latest infrastructure and being willing to kind of do that to enable that product feature. So that's what WisdomTree Prime is today. Where we see it going over time is getting much more, and we don't have these features yet to be clear, but adding more features around stablecoin on ramps and off ramps. I mean, I was listening to some of your past interviews talking about stablecoins being the killer app of crypto. I completely believe that. I think it remains the most under talked about story in finance broadly, where there's this giant growing stablecoin market that's kind of in some ways separate from the crypto asset prices, right? Like there's people trying to get finding real utility of having these dollar instruments on chain. And we want to integrate with these different stablecoins, allow people to fund their accounts with stablecoins, being able to send value out with stablecoins. And that kind of connectivity with the broader ecosystem is something we think is going to be really important for WisdomTree Prime going forward.
Okay, so there are a couple of comments you made there that I want to unpack a bit further. First, I'd love to have you when we say digital fund. And by the way, I'm looking at the lineup here right now. There's a WisdomTree 500 digital fund. There's a WisdomTree Technology and Innovation 100 digital fund. There's tips, short-term treasuries. It's a pretty robust lineup even at this point. But my question is, when we say digital fund, can you explain exactly what that means to somebody who's not familiar with this?
Yeah, and frankly, not a lot of people. It's a kind of a term that we invented, digital fund. I mean, other people call these tokenized funds. There's a few that exist in the kind of US 40 Act structure, registered funds that are sold by prospectus in the US. There's some that are existing offshore, right? But effectively, the idea is you've got a mutual fund with a share record, right, that's being able to be held in a wallet on chain, right? So there's a token that represents that share record. And so you hold that token in your wallet that represents your underlying interest in the fund. So it can be any fund. I mean, one of the common examples, right? You think if we talk about stable coins, maybe the next evolution of that being money market funds, right? Where you've got a dollar denominated instrument that's actually paying a yield consistent with money market funds, and you're able to hold the token in a wallet on chain. The key difference versus kind of what you think about it, crypto, right? As I think about it, is these are registered instruments. So they're not like bearer assets like USDC or Bitcoin today, where like there's no central register of somebody keeps of who owns all the Bitcoin in the world, right? It's just kind of maintained on chain. You get somebody's Bitcoin out of that wallet, like you are now the owner of that Bitcoin, right? That's different from how like the securities industry work, which is where they're registered instruments, where there is some sort of central, counterparty. Counterparty is not the right term, but central source for the underlying transaction and holders data of who has that. So that's what we've done. We've got a transfer agent that serves that function here. So they keep the record kind of consistent between what's on chain and what they're monitoring off chain of who owns what of the funds.
And so, what do you view as the benefits of that? Because some people will say, who cares? What difference does it make if shares are recorded on the blockchain? And so, I'm curious how you would respond to that. Is that just a first step down the path towards a longer term vision you were alluding to before, or are there some immediate benefits here today?
There are immediate benefits along the way to kind of this broader um, benefits that I talked about. I like to focus on three things: liquidity, transparency, and standardization. And these sound very consistent with what you see with ETFs. So like we were intentional about these three words. But liquidity, so to be fair, right now these are settling on like a end of day forward price basis, like mutual funds. But as you see with crypto, there's lots of abilities for much more customizable liquidity profiles of assets where you can trade not just 9 to 5 stock market hours, 9 to 4:30, but like 24/7, 365, instant atomic basis, right? So that kind of potential with this technology we see as kind of evolving. The potential with the technology is there. The assets having this evolving over time. Transparency, one of the things that we focus on with ETFs is the transparency to the underlying holders of knowing what you own, right, as opposed to mutual funds that might own, disclose it on a quarterly basis, what have you. So see a similar trend here. The last point that I want to touch on is this idea of standardization, so that you can hold any asset anywhere in the world, not just in a brokerage account, but just if you have an ERC20 compatible wallet on your phone. And that sort of idea is like very powerful over time. Where you're seeing this today, so the other platform I referenced was WisdomTree Connect. That has the ability for a customer to sign up, institutional customer, but point still stands, sign up. We give them effectively manage an on-chain identity for them in a way that allows them to transfer WisdomTree funds to other wallet holders, right? So that you can have true kind of peer-to-peer transfer of value in a way that's just not possible with existing systems. So that sort of peer-to-peer functionality is kind of the step function change in what exists today, which unlocks a lot of those benefits going forward that I described.
By the way, with the shares being recorded on the blockchain, the underlying blockchains you're using right now are Stellar and Ethereum. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And, I think bringing it to a tangible real world use case, you mentioned this before, but WisdomTree recently announced that users can select this government money market digital fund as a spending source for their WisdomTree Prime Visa debit card. And what I think is interesting about this, and you hit on, but I think it's important, is that if you had money sitting in a checking account, so it would be available for your debit card, traditionally you're not going to get paid any yield on that cash, right? Whereas with the WisdomTree Prime and this digital money market fund, you can earn the current yield. Last I checked, that was something around 4.5, 4.6%. So that money's sitting there waiting to be used, but you actually have a benefit to it. I don't know if you want to comment any further, but I mean, I
No,
think that's a good example of a real world tangible benefit.
oh, absolutely. I mean, I see kind of a convergence between the payments technology stack, right, and the investments technology stack with this technology, right? And this is a perfect example of that convergence where, this type of feature was available to, frankly, wealthy people in the past, right? Like that's the original idea of like the Merrill CMA, I believe is what you call it, where people were writing checks from their money market accounts, right? But not necessarily something that was available just to day-to-day retail users because frankly, a lot of financial firms like to collect the net interest margin on the cash balances, right? They don't want people moving their money to money market funds and holding their liquidity there. But I think with this modern technology, you're able to do use cases like that really demonstrate hopefully real world value for people. And just echoing that point on peer-to-peer transfer of value, right? I think we're seeing that with kind of crypto writ large. Even if you look at like things like Venmo moving towards crypto or PayPal, like that peer-to-peer transfer of value is extremely important and doesn't just need to be restricted to like a US dollar instrument, right? It can be had with money market funds or other types of funds that can be only available in this way.
You mentioned the WisdomTree Connect platform. I'd love to have you just expand on that a little bit further. So this is billed as seamlessly connecting TradFi with DeFi, right? You're integrating real world assets with on-chain delivery methods. Just talk a little bit more about the future vision for that platform.
Yeah, I mean, right now we've got one fund available. It's the WisdomTree Government Money Market Fund, Government Money Market Digital Fund. That's available through that platform today. You're seeing a lot of tokenized money market funds in the market. Clearly, there's a demand from firms that exist, or on chain, right? Whether they are foundations or crypto businesses or whoever who want to remain on chain. They transact in stable coins. and they'd prefer to get into, yielding or other diversifying instruments beyond just stablecoins or other crypto assets, right? And so the ability with WisdomTree Connect that we have to onboard a, new business and then allow them to place orders with us for like the money market fund, settle those orders effectively with a stablecoin. So we've got a stablecoin conversion service by which they can place the order. The value they send into us is USDC, and then they'll get back money market fund shares in token format, right? Kind of a very seamless way for them to exchange USDC into an instrument like this that's yield bearing, that has all the kind of protections that you get from like the 1940 Act funds. And we think that's like a great use case, and we're seeing a lot of demand for that from these crypto native businesses out there. I think that's only going to expand beyond money market funds, where as rates drop, which they're going to drop, you're going to see people wanting to get out into further duration, right? They might want to take equity risk. Like there's lots of there's no reason this just needs to stop there, right? If you're doing treasury or other portfolio management on chain, and that's a need that we feel like we're uniquely positioned to meet, and that's going to both kind of drive further utility for these people and also hopefully bring more and more people on chain and businesses on chain in this way.
Will, what inning are we in with all of this? It's funny because we talked about this at the outset of the conversation, just the vision that WisdomTree has had of innovating, within different wrappers. I'm on record as saying, and I'm a big ETF guy, but I'm on record as saying we're heading towards full tokenization. It's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's just when that happens. But where are we right now? Are we like top of the first inning with all of this, or you think we're a little bit further along?
I think maybe the second inning.
Okay.
I think we're starting to see these product market fit use cases, right, for serving the on-chain community, which is both on retail and institutional, is like a big today and growing community of people, right? There's tons of surveys out there of like Americans who hold crypto and want to do more in crypto, truly believe in it. So like that's a growing community as it is. And This is real utility for that for that community. I think it's the second inning. It's funny. Called the first inning was when I had this title for maybe 3-4 years now. When I first had this title, like there was nobody like people were like, you're doing what? Like you're not just like trading dog coins. Like I don't understand what you're doing. And Frankly, there's like every asset manager and big bank now has similar, title people at their firms, right? So it's definitely the second inning. Early in the ball game, but like people are coming to this. And it's not such a foreign concept to people. And it is interesting. I have noted that you've been a big bull on this. A lot of ETF people, I think, are open-minded about the way that like technology can change, wrappers can change, and like the way it's always been done does not need to be the way it's always going to be in the future. So I've noted that some of the biggest bulls on this space have been people who were early and believers in ETFs, right? And not to say that like ETFs, I don't think are going anywhere anytime soon. And maybe the way that tokenization kind of evolves is with a different client segment or solving different use cases than what we see with ETFs today. And that's great. Like it doesn't need to be like a one-to-one shift necessarily, but you are starting to see, I think, that like trend of growth towards that. And we'll see how businesses and platforms and people move on chain over time, and then really want to use assets like these.
I think that's all perfectly said. And, going back to mutual funds and being early into ETFs, seeing the disruption of mutual funds that was caused by ETFs, I think it's difficult if you go through something like that to assume that same thing can happen to the wrapper of today, which is ETFs. And I agree that ETFs aren't going anywhere, of course. I mean, they're going to have a long runway, there's going to be a long life cycle. But to think we're never going to come up with a better wrapper than an ETF, I think, how could you say that after seeing what we saw ETFs do to mutual funds? It's really that simple. I don't think it's more complex than that. Will, just a few minutes left here. I'd love to have you talk about this proposal I saw for the Spark Tokenization Grand Prix. What is this?
Yeah, it's kind of in exactly, like the use case I was talking about in terms of institutions in quotes, capital that exists on chain, right? So you've got the Spark Tokenization Grand Prix was kind of it's actually an RFP put forward for various tokenized treasury and money market fund issuers from the kind of a sub DAO of the overall parent DAO, Sky. Used to be called MakerDAO, right? So community of people, large pool of capital on chain that people have contributed to that they want to invest and diversify away from their currently and invest into tokenized treasuries, meaning that they want the exposure of treasuries or money market funds, but they want to hold it on chain with the conveniences and the automation and the other things that they like about that. So we submitted a proposal along with like a number of other firms, including some largest U.S. asset managers, international firms, and it's great to kind of put your foot out there and say like you want the business, and people can look it up, read the whole proposal that we've got written up to describe this, our offering there. That's what an example of like real like customer demand for these sorts of tokenized instruments, and it's like maybe a lot of people listen to it like DAOs, like kind of, it's just like, it seems strange, but it's just like pools of capital that want to hold these assets in a way that's convenient to them, right? Like that's always been a good thing to deliver for financial services. And yeah, it's been great to submit for that. Knock on wood, we'll get an allocation, but we're kind of on the journey in that.
What I love about this, and it's something that has been a recurring theme on this podcast thus far, is there's a lot of quiet building going on behind the scenes in crypto. And that's one of the things I'm trying to highlight, because I think the average person, they see all of the media hype around things like meme coins and NFTs and, of course, Bitcoin and Ethereum. And it's not that some of those things aren't important and aren't going to be, critical to how this space evolves moving forward. But there's so much quiet building going on to really develop value-added projects across crypto that I think are important. So I'm glad you touched on that. But we'll really enjoy the conversations. Congratulations to you and your team and everything you're building at WisdomTree. I'm personally very excited to see how this develops with WisdomTree Prime, which again I use. Already a great platform, but certainly sounds like we're just getting started. We're in the second inning, like you said. So best of luck on that. And thank you for joining me.
Thanks a lot, Nate. Thanks for your coverage of the space, and I'll talk to you soon, I hope.
Thank you. That was Will Peck, head of digital assets at WisdomTree. Hope everyone enjoyed this episode of Crypto Prime. Please be sure to leave a review or give this episode a like wherever you're listening or watching. I greatly appreciate that. And I'll be right back here again next week with another excellent guest. Thank you.
Crypto Prime is hosted by Nate Geraci, president of OTR Media LLC. Nate is also president of the investment advisory firm The ETF Store. While OTR Media LLC and the ETF Store are related by common ownership, they are separate and distinct entities, and anything discussed on this program should not be construed as an official statement by the ETF Store. This program is for informational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice. Investing in crypto assets involves substantial risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any past performance figures discussed are not necessarily indicative of future results. Visit CryptoPrimePodcast.com for more information.